We're here with Edson Oda, the writer director of 9 Days. If you haven't already seen it, it's become one of my favorite films just after a second viewing. Um, I want to start off asking about the music in the film. It's such a
Uh,
strong character. Why did you pick violin? Did you have this particular composer, Antonio Pinto, in mind, or what?
uh-huh, uh-huh. It's interesting because I think when I started writing, like an early draft actually was Amanda's character was like a pianist. He would play the piano, and it's just like and it was interesting that it starts evolving until like Amanda became Amanda, and it was about her and her, like journey, and then Winston, Will's character, just following her, and then I remember at some point feeling like I play the piano, and there's something about the violin that's interesting, and it's kind of very visceral, as you playing and just like going through like the chords, and I don't know, it just felt right, like making like changing from piano to violin. And I remember even when I was talking to Antonio is such a genius, he's just able to just compose things in a very contemporary way. Like he was able to just like, oh yeah, I can think of something for violin, and it's going to be very visceral. It's going to be very, you know, related to the soul of the character who would be playing. So it was interesting. He could, come up with this interpretation, and it was pretty cool.
How about the character of Kyo? I'm curious what this character means to you, your own interpretation.
Yeah, Kyo. It's interesting how a lot of different people they come with different interpretations for him. Some people ask me like, is Kyo God or Kyo like? And for me, I think it was interesting. I needed someone to be kind of worker in this world, and that could that I need someone for to be there for Will to talk and talk about his process. And it was interesting because initially the character of Kyo, the way I conceived him, he was another interviewer. He was another interviewer in another house. And I remember at some point it just felt like, yeah, no, I think there's something we need to define them in different roles, as Will would be the only one who could interview in this story, and then Kyo needs to be something else, but not like above or below him, but someone who is like almost like his peer, but would have to have like a totally different like a function in this world. So then came up with Kyo to be this kind of this person in that with that role.
So it was more kind of functional than necessarily. Were you also trying to give the audience a role that was more ambiguous that they could project something onto?
100%, 100%. It needed to be functional in the sense of, okay, I'm here to oversee what Winslow does, but I never thought as like it needs to be someone who didn't have the answers, somehow he's there, and he's also part of a whole, so and then from seeing that, I think the audience could come up with any interpretation, I think for some people, like, God doesn't have all the answers, somehow. So I think then Kyo translates that character. But yeah, I think that those are the kind of overall um, characteristics of him, and then all the rest is just up to who is watching to see the meaning they want to see in him.
I Winston spoke after the screening I went to the other day, and
Uh-huh.
in the Q&A he spoke about how you are an atheist and maybe approaching this film from a less overtly spiritual angle than maybe Winston himself perceived the film. So
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of curious what how you feel about the film now that it's.
Yeah, I think that what Winston, told me has to do, like, some points I'm not, I think I don't see like as this happened because of this and because of that and because of, and And sometimes I do. I think like, okay, there's some reasons and some kind of force and some, and in other ways I see as almost like this coincidence of events. You know, there's not much of a, it's almost like a matter of chance as things happen. But I think even in this matter of chance, yeah, there could be some meaning, but it's not that I'm 100% sure that that's how, you know, it happens. You know, and I think pretty much I think like that even nowadays. You know, I think there's a lot that comes from like you know, it's a coincidence, something that's just happened is there. But of course there's some kind of, you know, as long as it happens, so let's better enjoy it. You know, the fact that we're here talking is just like a what are the chances, what are the odds for, you know, all the Big Bang happening and all those, you know, things, you know, happening in planets, you know, being created, and then we are here right now just talking. It's just like a, of course, yeah, it's a matter of chance, but there's something that's kind of special about that, or something that we can't explain. I guess I think there's so much in our humanity and so much about our, you know, well, who we are. That's kind of we can't. There's nothing in relate to science that can explain that. It's very interesting that people talk about this movie about it's a sci-fi, and actually science is it's are things that are like concrete and can explain things with like a proving like a thesis or something. But it's I think this movie is kind of a, it's not like that. It's just a bunch of, you know, ideas and beliefs and kind of so I think it's more spiritual than sci-fi for sure. So yeah, I think this is a spiritual film, but I don't see it as something that comes with the answers or anything. It's just like you know, shows things as it could be. Is it also could be just could be a matter of chance, or it could be something that has more meaning. But I think it's up to the person who watch it to decide it.
Yeah, there is so much on the fringes of our understanding, and I feel that your film does a really good job of tackling that in a poetic way that doesn't
Okay.
beg any kind of literal interpretation as much as it lets you bring whatever attachments you have and
Okay.
project them onto the movie. Another thing that Winston mentioned in the Q&A is that you are a big Magic the Gathering player, and I'm curious what kind of deck you run or
Man,
what your history is.
that's so. Do you used to play?
Yeah, I have some friends who are a lot more into it than I am, who,
Man,
but yeah, I'm a fan.
I'm so glad you asked the question. No one ever, you know, asked the Magic was like the big thing in my life, like through like when it was like from I think 14 or something until it was like 19 or 18. It was my dream was just to compete in the world championship, you know. And I got close, you know. I got and it was really well ranked in Brazil. At some point, it was number 3 in Brazil, or like type 3, so type 2. And then I love the white and red deck. And it was interesting that I love this kind of a quick creatures like that with like a savannah lions and, you know, like some knights and stuff, and then it would just use the red for burn, you know, like incinerate, you know, like lightning bolt and this kind of stuff. And then and they, yeah, and then also like to play against blue, because blue was always like I was so scared about like this controlling decks. I don't know if it makes sense to you, but I was so afraid of controlling decks. And I said like, oh, I need some stuff to just go against them, because my deck was very vulnerable against those blue decks. And I felt like, and then I remember like sometimes I would play like type 1.5. I think that's how they call in Brazil, and they love this dual lands. Like I think it was plateau. Plateau was the dual lands for red and white. And then it's just like, and that was, it was great. And but no, I love the deck, and I love. It's interesting because a lot, some of my word building, you know, skills I think came a little bit from Magic, because I'm always trying to create like strategies. And people are just like, oh man, this deck's kind of great. You use like such a weird cards, and you kind of combine with each other in a way people don't, you know. And it was funny because somehow sometimes they work. So I think a lot of my creativity was you know, I could exercise them through Magic the Gathering. So yeah, thanks for asking that question. It's I have to play more, but I think I would stop making films if I start playing again, you know. So
Let's hypothesize for a second that your Magic play style, as you suggested, is kind of indicative of your character.
Mm.
So how does that translate to your artistic sensibilities?
That's great.
Maybe
I
your
love.
fear of control and
Mhm.
embracing the red and white deck.
It's so great because actually, red, white, and red is like almost like Emma and Kane, in the movie. Because but I think Emma is pretty much the white, in the sense of balance and like nurturing and like healing, all this stuff. And Kane is just all fire, it's just like throwing the fireballs and this kind of stuff. So it's funny you're saying that. And kind of Will's almost like blue, right? He's kind of is there. He's just like doing his Orchio. Yeah, no, I don't know. I think the other one is it's hard to put it in colors, but yeah, I think it's Emma, and it's almost like, yeah, and I feel. What was the other question? Sorry, I got too excited.
Um, well, no, that was exactly the question. Yeah, just how you were talking about how your passion for magic maybe helped you with world building and led you to
Yeah,
your artistic sensibilities. So I was just curious if you could speak
yeah,
to that.
and then also for sure, it has so much about magic, that structure, because you always like, okay, you have these cards, and then you have to create a deck based on almost like structure, right? Because you can have the lands and how many lands and how and somehow it's similar to like when you structure a screenplay. It's of course it's different, but there are some things that I think they kind of where those two skills they meet, in a sense of, okay, when first act's gonna be like this and then that and then, and always looking for like a reaction because you have an opponent in Magic the Gathering. But I think in films, not opponent, it's more like in the audience, so it's kind of you're playing with like it's not a duo, but it's more like, okay, you share your deck. So I think there's some similarity in that sense as well. Yeah.
And do you consider yourself a competitive person since at one point you said you were ranked third in Brazil?
I was very keen, I was very keen in my life. It's interesting, and I think at some point I started wanting to be more Emma, but everything that I've done in my life, since it was like a very young kid, I want to be the best in everything that I've done. And it was interesting at some point, I just started seeing that what's the point of this, So I think I remember even when it got to film school, my goal wasn't like being the best anymore. It was like in my personal statement was just, yeah, I think that's not the our purpose here or my purpose as filmmaker, but I just want to. It was more like almost trying to be a better human being, in some sort of ways. And then I think therefore, because filmmaking is weird. It's not like you become the best and then you're best filmmaker. So it's more about being the most person you can be, and then it shows you that you're I think you're a good filmmaker. So it was kind of the opposite. So I think as soon as it moves here, I start getting less competitive. But the fire is still inside me. I think there's this cane that's inside me, and I think you'll always be. You play Magic the Gathering, so if you play in competitive way, I think you know what it. And I play basketball. I play everything that it was very competitive, and yeah.
That's very cool. I'm just going to show you.
That's great.
Um, I made this deck from scratch. Like I drew all the cards.
Wow.
A gift for my friend who's really into it.
Oh my God.
That
Are those Wow. Are those cards that exist, or you create the cards as well?
I created them. So it's a deck of
Wow.
the species is called beards, and they kind of
Wow.
like they're a lot of defender creatures or with like zero attack, but then they get
Wow.
counters, and then the main beards kind of throw them at the opponent. It's
Wow. Wow.
anyway.
And it's interesting. Emma would be a zero attack creature, right? And
Yeah.
then Kane would be just, well, yeah, Kane I think would be a 2/2. Would be like something like with initiative. We would
Right.
just strike first. Yeah.
Haste and trample.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah.
Uh, cool. Yeah. Going back to some more of your artistic inspirations, Winston said you guys spoke a lot about anime. Um,
Yeah.
are there any particular really formative shows or movies from your childhood that you feel like were a reference for the kind of stuff you wanted to make?
100%, man. It's interesting that I remember at some point I want to be a mangaka, like someone who I never I didn't know how to draw, but it was kind of I thought it was the coolest job in the world, just like drawing and creating stories. It's interesting that I was, if I'm not wrong, I was watching like a podcast from Chloe Zhao, and she was saying the same thing. It felt like, oh, that's cool. And I remember, yeah, all this mangas. I was a huge fan of Dragon Ball Z. I was a huge fan of Yu Hakusho, Rurouni Kenshin, Samurai X here, and I watched kind of all everything like in the '90s, and yeah, I always dreamed that it was interesting because I never dreamed about making those stuff, but I always dream more like about meeting Goku, or this kind of stuff. So it was almost like they became part of my family at some point. So, but there's something about mangas that's kind of almost this naive feeling of there's a lot about mythology in the sense that it's kind of a uh, but journeys and somehow there's a lot about helping people. I don't know if you feel the same way. I think there's a lot about helping people and doing what's right, or not about being materialistic. Or it's interesting how you have this kind of ideas around like mangas, and I think they come from maybe Japanese culture that are founded and based on this kind of ideals. And even nowadays I think there's some of uh, Emma could be one of those Zen figures in that anime. I don't know which one would be right now, but she kind of has this kind of she knows more than the other ones because she kind of accept things. So she could be an anime character. And Kane could be too. It's interesting. I think since you spoke, it has this kind of influence in me, and even yeah, I really dream at some point making like a great manga adaptation, but it's tricky though. It's tricky. I think it's some things only work in manga, and and especially if you shoot here in America, I think there's some kind of there always be some kind of gaps between what you want and what is and what it should be. But yeah, I have this kind of dream of creating something that's related to that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. The manga and anime is so spiritual, and these moral
It,
fables. It feels
yeah,
very
yeah,
connected to
yeah,
your film and filmmaking.
yeah.
And also, I think a part of why it appealed to me personally as a kid is because manga is so it's always kind of about sublimation and expression. Like
Hmm.
these characters have to go to a foreign world to them that maybe is filled with adversity, and they have to grow and transform and kind of it's a microcosm for the artist's journey, kind of creating this world and going into it and learning about yourself through.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's so much about learning uh, who knowing yourself. Yeah, as you said, it's so much about this journey of very introspective and figuring things out, and I think humility, a lot of lessons of humility, and it's interesting. Like a lot, some of I think here there's some American heroes and they're more cocky. They're just like oh, that's cool, or Tony Stark, or like even Peter Parker when it's just, and it's interesting that how some of the heroes in animes, they usually the most powerful beings, they're always so humble, and there's so much about I'm powerful, I know it, but I'm not gonna show off, and it's so much about I love this kind of analogy. I always remember it's almost like when a sword, when it's not in the sheath, it loses its power. If you just showing it to everyone is just like bragging about it, that doesn't have any power. But if it's here, that's when you just have all the power to just go in and attack your opponent. And I always felt like from manga heroes, they always like hiding the real power because that makes them more powerful. Yeah, I think it's cool.
Definitely, definitely. And I also sensed that background when I was watching some of your earlier short films and commercials, because you have
Mhm.
several that are done in kind of this graphic novel
Yeah, yeah.
style, which was
Mhm.
really cool.
Ah, cool then. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm wondering what led you to do that kind of this really tactile experimental visual style.
That's an interesting story about it. It's just I remember there's this competition, Django Unchained competition, and it was like they were doing this kind of you make a short and then you're gonna meet him at Comic Con and all stuff. And then I said, yeah, I think I have an idea for this. And then it was just as I was thinking about something, yeah, it was feeling like, okay, this is Comic Con. This is like, Django Unchained. There's some pictures. What would be a way like to connect all those, themes in one thing? It's just, and then I felt, yeah, what if I try to tell? I love comic books, comic books and mangas. And if what if I try to tell this a comic book story, but through a more like cinematic way, in a way that okay, you're doing all the camera moves, the dollies, you're doing, zooms, but it's everything is on the page, everything is on the is there. So it's almost like it's still like a two-dimensional thing, but you're adding the two-dimensional elements to your narrative. So I feel yeah, I think that's cool. It could be simple, and I think I would have we would be able to make in time to just submit for this competition, and then so yeah, I did some tests and then I took some, print some stuff and then I felt like, oh, I think it's cool. I showed some of my friends and they said it was really like, is this too silly? And then no, it's actually it's pretty cool. And then it started just evolving the the execution like through making it more interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like an imaginative kid reading a comic book itself,
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah. Yeah.
participating with the
Yeah.
story, where
Yeah.
you're moving around the pages, you're adding your own sound effects.
Mhm. Yeah.
For those of you that haven't seen Edson's shorts, you can look them up. Where there are two, Moleskin and Malaria, that
Mhm.
are done with this approach, and they're definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. Cool.
Um, so you did an earlier interview years ago with Eric from Ion Cinema, my editor, the founder of Ion Cinema. And
Mhm.
you use an expression in that interview for Will's selection process that
Mhm.
I really liked, which is just being a good fit versus changing how the world is,
Yeah.
kind of the Cain and Emma dichotomy.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious how you believe this concept applies to filmmaking, and
Uh,
striking the balance between
yeah.
personal taste and mainstream appeal.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, man. It's that's a great question. It's uh, when it's even similar to what I went through while I was, trying to get into the industry, and I was feeling like I wanted to just be a fit. I wanted to, just create something that people were wanting to see from me, and they would see me as this guy who would create something that's kind of sci-fi or more visual movies, and then I was just writing stuff like that would, be what they wanted to um, to get from me. And it was interesting because when I was doing that, I think what I was writing, I liked some of the stuff I wrote, but it wasn't as personal. It wasn't as good as a tricky word, but it was yeah, it wasn't good in a way that you wouldn't connect in more like a deep way, I guess. Especially people who would read it. And then I think at some point I just decided, I'm just gonna do what I believe in and not try to fit. And then if people like it, great. If don't, at least I did what I wanted, And then I wrote 9 days, and it was interesting when I didn't want to fit. That's when it kind of fit because everyone was like, "Oh yeah, this is cool, this is great," and then people start just liking it more. So it was interesting I when I was consciously trying to fit, I couldn't. But when I consciously say I don't care if I fit or not, then I kind of fit. So which was an interesting lesson. So yeah, and I think in the sense of filmmaking, it's I think it's easy for you. Of course, you always have to be considerate in a sense like this. This is living in a society and making movies. I'm not gonna watch I'm not the audience, you know, in the sense that I can't, I am the audience, but it's not just about me. So you have to think of other people. But it looks like when you do that, you start losing traits of personality or what you as a human being you can offer to the rest of the world, right? Because then you become the word rather than just saying a different message. So I think that's how I experience it.
And that kind of goes along with your earlier metaphor about competing with the audience almost, because you're challenging them and hopefully giving something to them, but you're not catering to them or trying to tell them what they already know or believe or feel. You're very
Yeah,
much sharing.
I don't, yeah, I don't know if competing is the right word. I think it's more not giving them everything they want. You know, I think it's more like that because you can't spoil people, or audience, and I feel sometimes I have a great editor who would teacher would say like cut to what cut to what they want to see when they want to see, and it's great. But as well, sometimes I most of the times I apply that, but sometimes I apply another concept that it kind of evolution of that. Cut to what you want them to see when you want them to see, because it's not always you have to, give what they want, but as cliche as sound, give what they need, somehow. So yeah, I think it's kind of a
How has your writing process evolved since your early commercials or even since 9 days? Clearly, you're working on some new stuff on the wall.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I wish it evolved better. It just I felt like, oh, now things are gonna be easier. It's not, they're not. But I think what the way it evolved was more like an affirmation of what I should keep doing, in a sense of, okay, so I did that. I wrote this story that's more personal, and it took me a while, and I'm not a interest. I'm not something they're gonna just keep generating material. It's hard. So it's good just an affirmation of like, okay, I can take my time. I can just like dive deep into it and try to be personal and start sharing with people when I think it's ready. So it's something that I'm trying to keep doing when I'm writing like something. And I want to keep writing personal stories for sure. And I think that was a good lesson that I learned for 9 days. If you write personal stories, some people won't get it, but the people who get it, they'll get it in a deep level, I think.
awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, Edson. I really appreciate all your answers. And
No, I appreciate it, man. It was a lot of fun. There are so many questions I never, never was asked, and magic and so it was a lot of fun. It was exciting to talk to you.
always interesting to see where an artist draws from, because there's probably an accumulated mix of all different kinds of elements that you wouldn't
Yeah.
expect.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I need to go back to Magic the Gathering. Yeah, I think I dream about Magic like 2 days ago, actually.
Wow, really? What was,
I dream like frequently about Magic the Gathering. So yeah,
like playing it or about the
showing my deck and playing or some stuff, or yeah, and yeah.
Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.